Okay, this is the first video dealing with the specific arguments of the King James only camp, and this one is the Fighting Back by James Melton. Yeah, James Melton, and that's the title. Handy reference guide for King James Believer, little booklet. The first point that he deals with, and this is listed under reasons for accepting the KJV as God's preserved word. Point number 1. God promised to preserve His words, Psalm 12:6-7, Matthew 24:35. There has to be a preserved copy of God's pure words somewhere. If it isn't the KJV, then what is it? Well, Psalm 12, it's talking about the words of the Lord are pure as silver and so forth. And I think that what the King James only camp has come away with is thinking that God has promised and has carried out keeping His specific words in the word order that He spoke. So that if He said, for example, you shall not murder, and if it doesn't come down to us as that, and it comes down to us as you shall not kill, then that means that that's not God's words, because kill, murder, it's not the same. I mean, it's a synonym, but because it's not specifically that exact word, then it hasn't been preserved. The problem with that, and what I feel that that's not a point in favor of the King James only movement, is if you remember my previous videos when I dealt with the Old Testament and I dealt with the Septuagint. That's the Greek translation of the Old Testament that was done about 200 years before Christ. And if you remember, what has been proven, and I gave examples of it so you can look it up yourself, even in the King James Bible you can see it, that the New Testament writers, the apostles themselves, more often than not, when they quoted the Old Testament, they quoted the Septuagint translation. Now, to me, that kind of ends the whole idea that God preserved His exact word order, exact wording, so forth. However, the point still remains, though, that the meaning, His original meaning that He said, has not changed. If I tell my 3-year-old son, go let the dog out, and my wife comes along to remind him later, your daddy said to take the dog outside. That's not the exact word order, that's not the exact word for word dictation of what I said, but the meaning is preserved, the message is conveyed. So I think that the evidence actually points more to that line than to a word for word, and it's because of that Septuagint situation in the New Testament that to me is a clear-cut showing that that's not the way God done it. Another thing to point out is in the Psalm 12 passage in Matthew 24, it doesn't say the King James, and it doesn't tell us how God is going to preserve those words. So He doesn't tell us, by what apparatus, what method, what mode, so forth. So those things coupled together, in my mind, dismisses this as being, a legitimate point for the King James only. Alright, number 2, and I have to do this fast because I'll run over. It has no copyright. The text of the KJV may be reproduced by anyone, for there is no copyright forbidding its duplication. This is not true with the modern perversions. Again, ignoring the colorful adjectives that are used to kind of lead the witness, as they say. Dealing with the point of his point. The King James Version, when it was, of course, done in 1611, only certain printers were licensed to print the King James Bible. At first it was Barker. After his license expired, other people were able to apply and get it. So eventually it was able to be printed in other places by different printers. And they sold their copies. So it's not like, they were printing and handing them out free. There was a cost involved. To this day, technically the crown, the monarchy of England, owns the rights to the King James Version. But because it's so old and it's outside of the United States, there's no modern copyright laws for it. However, with the new versions, because they have been done under modern law, again, only certain publishers have licenses and rights to print the version, and then they sell it. There's really no difference. It's just a matter of difference of the age you're in, but the same principle is there. So, again, I think that argument really does not apply or persuade the case either way. So we'll start with point number 3 on the next video.